I have talked to other women about what happened to me. Some women were stalked and terrorized, and some were not. But through these conversations, I learned that each of us had had the same fear, that he would do something to us. Something, being a word we all knew was interchangeable with sexual assault, even if we never uttered the words. I used to fear the same, until I was stalked. Now, I don't mean to say that what happened to me is worse than that something that all women fear, that it was worse than sexual assault. But what did happen to me, what he did, will haunt me for the rest of my life. This man, I only met him one time at a party. He was the cousin of a friend of a friend. We spoke for an hour or so. I was feeling alone, maybe a little lost. It was a hard time in my life. So when he approached me with a disarming smile, I was happy to lose myself in conversation. He was funny, cracking joke after joke, trying to keep me laughing. And then he tried to kiss me. At the last moment, I turned my head aside and told him I'm sorry, but I didn't see him like that. It was as though a switch flipped. All his joking and energetic chatter vanished in an instant. He started going off at me, ranting and calling me names, talking about how women are all the same. You know the words every woman hears when they reject a typical nice guy. When I tried to calm him down, he only arced up even more, getting louder and more aggressive. Me standing there in the middle of a party being shouted at by a stranger. Thankfully, my friend rescued me. She cut the guy off mid-rant and steered me out the front of the house. She apologized up and down, told me she'd get her boyfriend and his mates to kick him out, and begged me to stay a bit longer. But I decided I'd had more than enough excitement for one day. In the cab on the way home, I was already replaying the scene in my head, thinking how I'd tell it at the next gathering, and we'd all laugh and cringe at this guy's audacity, and that would be the end of it. Just another fun story. Except it wasn't the end of it. This guy somehow got hold of my number. He must have gotten it from someone at the party, presumably before he went mental and started ranting about how much of a slut I am. First he added me on Facebook, then he followed me on Instagram and on Snapchat. I even got a LinkedIn request from him. Of course, I blocked him everywhere and locked all my profiles down, but that wasn't enough to get rid of him. I'd get calls from private numbers at all hours of the day and night. He started showing up at the cafe outside my work every single day. I just ignored him, pretending he wasn't there and going about my life. But that was about as helpful as trying to use crystals to cure a cancer diagnosis. And just like cancer, with nothing to stop him, he spread unopposed into more and more areas of my life. It only took a few more weeks before I started seeing him around my suburb. I'd go grocery shopping and catch glimpses of him at the far end of the aisle. I'd be washing my car and see him sitting on a park bench at the end of the cul-de-sac. I'd see him when I was out walking my dog, and I have a bloody Pomeranian, not a Staffy. But still, I didn't freak out. Why didn't I freak out? I saw him as an annoyance, irritating but harmless. My friends were concerned, but not alarmed. I made the mistake of telling my mum, and she went and bought me a can of pepper spray online and had it delivered to my house. Having it did make me feel a little better. I just keep looking back and thinking how naive I was. Pepper spray isn't a shield, and if you're in a situation where you're forced to use it, it's probably already too late to do any good. I'm sure you can guess what happened next. He broke into my house, smashed in the window one night and came straight for me. He was wearing a ski mask, but I know it was him. Of course it was him. The pepper spray was useless. He broke my nose, 2 of my ribs. When I was on the floor, gasping for breath and trying to reach for my phone, he crushed my hand under his boot, breaking the pinky finger. He didn't try and rip off my clothes. He didn't say a word or make a sound the entire time he was beating me. And when he was done, he just left. I called the emergency line and begged them to send the police to my house. They searched the whole suburb and couldn't find him, but told me they'd keep looking. The next day I got security cameras installed and I applied for a gun license. And then I went and bought the heaviest aluminium baseball bat I could find. After a few weeks, my body healed, and I suppose my mind did too. He'd disappeared. The police couldn't find him, and I no longer saw him everywhere I went. I started to feel safe again. And then one night, he jumped out of the shadows as I was taking the bins out to the curb, and again, he beat me. I didn't have the gun on me. No weapon, no defense of any kind. The security cameras didn't catch him not that far from the front door. So again I called emergency services, and again the cops couldn't find him. Not a trace of him anywhere. So again, I tried to heal. I tried to move on. Months passed. The police promised they'd tell me if they caught him, but I heard nothing. I tried to forget. I hadn't seen him since the night of that second attack. I stopped getting calls from private numbers. His social media profiles were all inactive. So I thought it was over. It should have been over. Then one day, I took my car out of the garage to go to work. I drove about a block or so before he jumped out from behind the back seat with a knife. It was 5 a.m. The streets were basically empty. He brought that knife to my throat and he punched me 11 times. I counted each one. I lost 3 of my teeth. My lips were bleeding. My left eye, oh God, my left eye. After he used my face as a punching bag, he opened the door and left. And I was just lying there in my own blood in too much pain to even reach my phone. Someone eventually saw me and called 000. And again, the cycle repeated. There were 3 more attacks after that. And so, little by little, I lost everything. I even lost my job, since I spent too much time in the emergency room, and later in my own home, recovering from what he did to me. I lost my savings, paying for better security that he always managed to avoid somehow. I lost my car. I sold it to buy food to pay the bills. And then I lost the roof over my head once I was unable to pay the rent. I moved twice, but that still didn't stop him. He took everything from me. And so there I was, 29 years old with nothing to my name. I ended up living in the streets, homeless, fighting with the rats for a bite of something old out of the garbage. Most of the time, unable to get a bed in a shelter. I was alone. I was ashamed. I didn't want to see my old friends. Well, the few that tried to keep in touch and help me at least. The others forgot about me 10 minutes before I made the wide, wild city my whole domain to live as a slave of circumstance. 4 months later, when winter came and I saw other people, other homeless people, falling to the harsh nights this far south, when a storm was approaching, when I felt death close to me, different than the way it felt every time that asshole was beating me, then I took my chances. I saw a house. I saw a man. I'd managed to get food on this block before. I knew he lived alone. So I hid in the bushes, and when he went outside, I went to his door. It was open. Carefully, I made my way up to the attic. It was dark and it was dusty, but it was a roof over my head. I planned on staying the night. I didn't plan on everything that happened after that. Please, you have to believe. You have to believe me. Yes and yes. I began living in that stranger's house, and the owner didn't even know it. I overheard his last name while he was on the phone one night ordering takeout for one, Kowalski. He seemed to be an average middle-aged loner, or at least he was when all of this started. The night I first crawled into his attic, my only thought was surviving through the storm. I didn't imagine it would rain for 10 days straight. So I became a squatter of sorts, I guess. Every morning when Kowalski went to work, I would emerge from my crawl space to explore the house. At first I used a scarf, one of my few treasured possessions and one of my only remaining personal items, to cover my face. It was in case he had cameras inside the house, you see. He didn't, as I found out later, once I became more bold. The first exploratory ventures made me feel like a small animal, a prey animal, venturing into the unknown world. The first day, I managed to take only a few steps from the attic stairs before my nerves gave out, and I retreated immediately, heart racing. The second day, I was forced to be more bold out of sheer necessity. I had to find the bathroom. So, holding my scarf close to my face, I wandered around inside the 2-story house, trying to get a feel for the layout. Kowalski's house had 2 bathrooms. One was upstairs. That's where I got my water, just enough to keep me until the next day. By day 3, it was still raining and I was so hungry. I hadn't eaten since that first night, the night I invaded his home and set up a nest in his attic. So, naturally, I stole from him. The fridge was sad and empty, like a metaphor for this man's life. So I raided the freezer, which was packed to the brim with desserts and sweets and empty calories. He wouldn't miss 2 or 3 frozen candy bars. By day 6, I knew the layout of the house well, and I began using my exploratory outings in this man's home to collect provisions. I took some empty Coke bottles and filled them with water. I found an old cloth bag stuffed deep into the cabinet under the kitchen sink so I could use it to carry what few possessions I had. To my delight, I found a dusty old sleeping bag on a high shelf in the garage and took it for myself. It was old, he surely didn't need it. On day 7, I felt confident enough in my invisibility to take a quick shower. The hot water rushing over me was surreal, so pleasant but so alien at the same time. By day 9, I had figured out a system of stealing Kowalski's leftover food, just enough for him not to notice. The food wasn't nutritious, but it was enough to keep me alive, and back then that was enough for me. The rain finally stopped on day 11. I could feel the sun, the bright light outside, the warmth of its rays. Life, right outside, ticking ever onwards, and pulling slowly away from me, leaving me behind. But the darkness I dwelled in was safer, so I decided to stay. Right there, in silence, lying in the humid attic, waiting, just waiting. I spent each night suspended in a simulacrum of death, hugging myself with arms crossed, palms touching each opposite shoulder, staring wide-eyed at the blackness around, silently breathing, entertaining myself with violent ideations. Yes, one day I would find the man who did this to me. I would find that asshole who beat me and pushed me into homelessness, one day, and I would do to him everything he did to me. I would ruin his life the way he ruined mine, drive him out into the streets to live like a dog, as he'd forced me to do. Some fantasies were more grim than others. Some fantasies were more grim than the others. But when I lost myself in these visions of revenge, I felt empowered. Even when my rage was so tangible that its bitter taste filled my mouth. But then, once the fantasies receded, once I was pulled back to the reality of my situation, it only made the pain worse. You see, I had to be awake during the night because I used to sleepwalk when I was a kid. Even if I hadn't had an episode in almost 20 years, I was afraid it could happen again and I'd be driven from my safe hiding spot, my nest, and probably charged with trespassing. So I only slept during the day when Kowalski was at work, and even then, only 4 hours or 5 at a time. I lost count of the days I'd lived in Kowalski's attic. But one day, In those dead hours when he wasn't at home and I wasn't sleeping, when I wasn't cleaning myself or looking for supplies, something happened. I heard footsteps on the floor below, someone walking around the second story. I just felt sadness. I hadn't gone to the bathroom that day, I hadn't needed to, but I would eventually. And now I knew I would have to wait another day. Imagining the pain that I was in for a brief moment, I actually missed life in the streets. And yet, an hour or so later, I heard the unmistakable sound of the front door opening and Kowalski's heavy footsteps entering the house. I was mad, angry at my earlier self for simply mistaking the house's creaking as footsteps. But the next day, I heard it again. Those were footsteps, walking slowly, as if casually strolling, just below the trapdoor. Not going from room to room, but back and forth. After the last sound of footfalls faded, I waited for an hour before venturing out of the attic. And no one was there, I was alone. I took my shower, refilled my bottles, I stole some more food and made sure everything was in order. I was always thorough, paranoid even. No signs of my existence were ever left behind. Then I retreated back to the darkness of the attic. But sometimes, still, faintly, I could hear it. Those footsteps. And more. Whistling. Humming. Somewhere nearby, somewhere close, lurking beyond the borders of my queenless kingdom, where I was free to do nothing, sometimes not even move. And so I would close my eyes with such force that it was painful sometimes, and I tried to retreat into my imagination. A colossal struggle for me. I never had too much imagination. But if I let my mind wander long enough, I would always end up lost in the labyrinth of my thoughts. My awful, despicable thoughts. The person I'd become, she couldn't focus on happy memories. I couldn't hold on to the memories of the days of running and playing as a child, the silly arguments over a family game of Scrabble or Monopoly, the beaches and the mountains we visited on holiday, my friends laughing ourselves stupid or arguing politics after a few drinks at the bar, my brother, my sister, my parents. No. I had to remember that asshole. The beating that started everything. And the beatings after that. The pain. The blood running from my broken nose. The stabbing pain in my side with each gasping breath. The worst part is, it worked. The feelings of all the pain, all the misery, I lost myself in it. And when I disconnected from reality like that, it pushed away the sounds of that strange presence, prowling just beyond the borders of my refuge. I was being stalked again. At the end of my second week living in Kowalski's house, hiding in his attic, I decided I needed a healthier attitude. While I was there, lying, with nothing to do, forced to remain silent, I collected the elements of my future life piece by piece. And then I tried to solve the puzzle. Psychologists probably have a name for what I was doing. You would probably just call it getting your life together. Well, a plan to get my life together. Even if it was more like daydreaming about getting a tent and camping in the woods, getting a car to pretend I was living a normal life. Nobody would have to know I was homeless. I could even get a job, minimum wage, doesn't matter. Get back on my feet, save something, get away. Thousands of miles away. Shake the shame. Get a tiny studio apartment, a fridge, food until I'm stuffed, taking a bath whenever I want to, making as much noise as I want to make, for as long as I want to make it, until not even I can stand it. Life, I think they call that. Still, as bright as those thoughts were, they got old fast. Fast as anything I can think of did. So, I had to find a way to entertain myself during those few hours I was able to leave the attic. Funny, I felt like a kid in so many ways, hiding from an adult, going places I wasn't supposed to, doing things that scared me, fearing a ghost. Yes, at that point, the sounds in the house were named Ghost, with a capital G. It was a name, not a noun. And yes, I was afraid of going to the bathroom, of leaving the attic at all. But that was the case even before Ghost showed up. The thought of getting caught was terrifying. Jail didn't bother me. Not really. Actually, it would have been an improvement. It was the thought of Kowalski throwing me back on the streets to fight for my life in the cruel, merciless urban ecosystem that made me cry, as I used to cry when I was 10 and my brother took all the ice cream for himself. So I decided I should be a brave girl, conquer my fears, all over again. And after taking my shower and cleaning everything up barefoot, I explored the house. I took a knife with me, just in case Ghost decided to pay a visit while I was exploring. To be honest, I only had a real idea of what the upper floor and the kitchen were like. I never explored beyond that. The bare glimpses I had of the house before were not enough anymore. I started on familiar soil with the second floor, revisiting everything I had already seen and finding small new details that I missed the first time. There was a room with a small, child-sized bed and no other furniture. There was an empty room with a pair of paintings on the walls, nothing I could recognize. Not that I know a lot about art, or anything for that matter, but it seemed very amateurish to my eye. There was no paint lying around, no brushes. I assumed that Kowalski used to paint. And then I found this other room. I don't even know what to call it. Dumpster might be the right word. There was an old fan, a bunch of closed boxes, a table, shelves, books in Polish and English, a Paleolithic computer, everything just gathered, put there with no order, thrown in and forgotten, I guess. No, I didn't belong there. The first floor was very much like the second. There was another bathroom and the kitchen, as I said. A tidy master bedroom and what I thought was a guest bedroom. A library full of books about philosophy and physics and history, and probably not one single non-fiction novel. Not that I tried to find one. And then there was the living room. A big couch, a carpet, a coffee table, you know. A big television mounted to the wall, massive. The place itself was big and expensive. I wondered why a man who lived alone would want such a place. And then I wondered what Kowalski did for a living. I'd overheard him on the phone several times, but never gotten any clues about what his work actually involved. And then there was the basement. I opened the door and, using the light that bled over my back from the room behind me, I tried to find the switch for the basement's lights. I didn't find it, so I went down, slowly, fearing the possibility of falling, breaking one of my bones, and not being able to retreat to the attic, of being found. Oh, God. Being found. As I took that first step, descending, the darkness below seemed to devour me. It was good. It was good. The shadows were old friends at this point. I felt safer being tucked behind its black mantle. And then, once I reached the floor, still with one hand on the wall to guide me, I found the switch. And then, as they say, there was light. The light bulb burned with its yellow, phantasmagoric glow. My eyes adjusted, and I will need a lifetime to recover. I was in front of some kind of altar. There was a circle painted with a dark stain of some kind. In the center, a pedestal, and on the pedestal something white. Pushed by curiosity and nothing more, I stepped forward. The white thing was a sculpture of a snake made from bones. Vertebrae formed the body, and many small finger bones, phalanges, formed its head. And the tongue, I swear, the tongue was moving. And as I was there standing still, I heard it. Footsteps. I ran. Like an idiot 15-year-old, I ran upstairs, back to the attic, heedless of who might hear me, instead of outside. I stayed in the dark, trembling, listening, and for a moment I was able to locate the exact place where those footsteps were coming from, behind me. But it was just for a moment. A minute or two later, I could hear it on the floor below me. Again. Kowalski and Ghost in the house, and me living in the attic. At that point, I think it was at the beginning of my 3rd week hiding, living there, the attic felt like a separate dimension of sorts. The trapdoor was the threshold. The stairwell was the place between places, between realities. On one side, the light, the world, life. On the other, the darkness. And I was a dweller of the shadows. A creature, a lightless silhouette, a phantom, moving with silent steps, breathing the stale air, sitting still most of the time, waiting in the long hours of the day, for the moment I could cross to the other side, to take a bite of real life and experience for a moment what existence is supposed to be. The memory of someone who was, long ago, enduring a lifetime of loneliness. I noticed from the very beginning that Ghost never let his presence be known during the nighttime, only during the day when Kowalski was away, busy doing whatever he did, working 3 jobs. And Ghost, those damn noises, the footsteps, the whistling, became more intense as the days passed before my eyes, like the frames of a horror movie. I would say in slow motion, but life itself was in slow motion for me. On one of my few expeditions to the garage, I found a flashlight and some batteries, more things to make my treasures. I took them because I thought I might need them. Fool, I should have known I was going to need it sooner rather than later. And so this one day, Ghost was happy. He or she or it was moving more than usual around the 2nd floor. For an hour or so I could hear it. From the stairs to just below my trapdoor to one of the rooms, going slowly on tiptoes to the bathroom, running to the trapdoor and then jogging to the stairs and just on repeat. As I listened, I felt my bladder tense, swollen, pushing my guts, burning in pain. I tried to deal with it. I couldn't afford not to, but I wouldn't wish something like that on anyone. Well, I wouldn't wish my entire life on anyone. Almost anyone. Anyway. Usually I would wait 30 minutes after Ghost stopped making noise. If he was quiet for longer than that, I knew it was safe to go outside since he was done for the day. That day he left, if he left at all, 15 minutes before Kowalski normally came home. Then I had to sit several hours holding my body fluids inside of me as Kowalski relaxed with his strange music as he had dinner and watched a movie. He took a shower as he went to bed. And after that, there was this need I had to be sure he was asleep. Another hour until I could open the trapdoor and go down, slowly, in a silent house, where every single thing I could have done would sound loud as an explosion. Tiptoeing, with the column of light from the flashlight giving me the small relief of seeing what I had in front of me, I made my way to the bathroom, and then I had to be sure he wouldn't hear me. I did remember something my brother told me when we were children. "We boys can aim, that's how we don't make any noise. There's one point on the toilet, here and here, where it barely makes any noise." Yeah, it would have been better if I could remember where here and here were supposed to be. I don't think that's how it works for women. I won't go into details. Let's just say I was lucky. Kowalski wasn't easy to wake up. With my face to the wall and the flashlight in my mouth, squatting, armed with a lot of patience, after some time of trial and error, I've figured this damn thing out. I think I now understand what real penis envy is. Thank you, Freud. You were right all along. At least with this. Maybe sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. During the next few days, it all repeated. Ghost would appear and stay until the last possible moment. At times I thought he was doing it on purpose just to fuck me over. Because of course I thought that. It was the world against me. It had been for so long that I couldn't think of reality on any other terms, not anymore. I was fighting a one-woman war for survival against everything else. Against any and all things that formed the universe itself. Even the stars, shining millions of light years away, were mocking me. So it became a habit. Slowly, I changed my circadian rhythm and whatever other rhythm existed in my body. I forced my organs to work in a more comfortable way. I never experienced again that pain because of my bladder. It hurt, yeah, but progressively it hurt less, until it was just another annoying discomfort, just another thing I had to live with. I guess by then I was used to it. What happened afterwards, it isn't as clear. I developed, I wouldn't call it a phobia of light, no, but I got used to the dark. I created my own well-being there by ignoring the misery. Looking back, it was a kind of Stockholm syndrome. Like the way a victim convinces themselves that they like the things their captors do to them in order to believe that things aren't as bleak as they are. And in that bleakness of my own, I tried to thrive. I accomplished something in doing so, but I don't know what it was. But after that, I didn't want to go outside where the sun was shining. I escaped from the light of day as nocturnal animals do. Sometimes, when I really needed to steal something to eat, I felt the gloom hurting my eyes. I wasn't directly exposed to any source of light. I even avoided being close to windows, and Kowalski always closed everything up before he left the house. But still, I was becoming one with the shadows of that place. I became part of it. I remember thinking this one time, if that was what happened to Ghost, if they too got stuck in the corridors and if that was their life now, maybe we had something in common. And you know what? At that time, I was certain I was right. According to my watch, and I had always had a watch with me since I was a kid, and homelessness didn't change that. According to my watch, it was Thursday. I overheard Kowalski speaking on the phone. He isn't a loud person, so I had to strain and decipher bits and pieces of conversation in order to understand what was happening. He was going to host a party, and it seemed pretty big. I thought, well, it's just a reunion managed by a mild-mannered, middle-aged guy. What could go wrong? It would just be a celebration of boredom by devotees of anxiety, a mispronounced, stuttering mass held by a priest of the Church of Outsiders. Yes, I was very biased towards Kowalski. It was Friday, and I was more or less ready. I got a bucket the night before, and let me tell you, that was the riskiest trip I had ever made, at least up until then. On Thursday night, after I visited the bathroom and filled my bottles with water, I had to go downstairs. I didn't know how much noise it would take to wake Kowalski up, so I couldn't afford to make any mistakes. None at all. I think it was 2 a.m. I switched the flashlight on and off at intervals, just in case. Then I walked slowly as a snail fleeing in panic. Of course, I had to pass by Kowalski's bedroom to get to the garage. He slept with the door open. I learned that, in that precise moment, I felt all my body trembling, possessed by the forces of dread, invaded by the armies of the fears that live in the back of my mind. I managed to pass in a single, soundless move. I got to the garage and found an old bucket I'd seen there before. That was a golden opportunity, you see. I could steal a few extra things, I could take the risk of Kowalski noticing. He would blame one of his friends, and I could get something extra. And I did. I got 2 blankets, a pillow, 2 more empty soda bottles, and a few old clothes, pants and a t-shirt. For men, almost rags, but clean. I hadn't taken a shower in several days at that point, and I knew I was going to need more clothes. And yes, I knew well I had to leave that place. I just couldn't think of any other way of living. Not back then. I returned to the shadows in the attic, where it was safe, and continued life as what was now my normal. Funny, that Friday, Ghost was absent. Not a single footstep, no whistling, no nothing. He, at that point in my mind, was a masculine thing. He just didn't visit that day. I heard them, the party guests. They came one by one or in pairs. The first thing I noticed was how noisy they were. I thought, this is too much for a bunch of middle-agers getting together to eat and complain about their jobs. And then, not long after that, it dawned on me. These are kids. In their 20s, late teens. But these are young people. I swear I could almost smell the weed burning below. And the music filled the house, pushing the misery away, replacing it with happiness, euphoria, fun. Sadly, it pushed it my way. All the memories fell upon me in a cascade and drowned me in a sea of my own sorrows. It wasn't that long ago when I would go to parties. I would meet people, I would have fun, but there I was, alone, in the dark, hiding, while everyone else was having a good time. And even when I couldn't see anything, I closed my eyes, squeezing them shut until it hurt. I put my hands over my ears. I pushed until it hurt. Until it hurt. I closed my mouth as hard as I could, grinding my teeth together. But I couldn't escape outside, so I escaped inside. I tried to find solace in what was left of me, but I couldn't. Thinking about what my life would be like once I managed to get back on my feet felt delusional. In that moment, I was forced to see, in all its magnitude, what I had become, the shade of the woman I once was. An apparition, silently haunting a house, this shy spirit, this lost soul, this stationary wanderer. But in one moment during the night, when I was busy hating myself, A noise pulled me from drowning in my thoughts and emotions. Someone opened the trapdoor. The light from the house shone in as if it was illuminating a theatre production. Someone pulled down the steps. Someone came up. A man, maybe 30 years old. A girl followed him. She was clearly intoxicated, mumbling something that I heard as only no. The man, he didn't care. And I had to watch. I saw it. I saw what happened. I covered my mouth to avoid screaming. I should have screamed. I should have done something. In the next few minutes, my eyes caught every single detail. Her attempts to fight him off, her clothes ripped off her body, the man's laugh, the crying, that high-pitched sound. Suddenly she wasn't a woman, she was a little girl calling to her dad for help that didn't come. I remember her kicking against the floor, and the man's threats and how he took pleasure in all of it, damn it. And once he finished, he stood up, cleaned himself off on her, and congratulated her for being such a wonderful lover. Then he took a bill from his wallet and just let it fall on her, and she lay there, crying, softly, for a long time. Eventually she pulled herself together, I guess, and just went downstairs. And the trapdoor stairs came up again, and the trapdoor was closed, and there was no light anymore. And downstairs, in the house, the music kept playing, and she kept crying. I'm certain of it. Maybe she still does. It was mechanical. I think it was a month since I first made my way into Kowalski's attic to live in without him knowing it. It started as something innocuous, innocent. I was just in distress after what I saw, after what that man did to that girl in front of my eyes. Never mind. I was a nervous wreck, that's for sure. I couldn't do any of the things that used to calm me down. No long hot showers, no watching over and over again the same episodes from The Twilight Zone, no singing off-key at the top of my lungs, and God knows I needed some of that, any of that. So I walked in circles, in my small place, in the minuscule confines of my domain. I was stressed, but still sane enough to keep in mind that I should not make any noise at all. As I moved my legs and touched the floor with my feet, directing my body to draw the circle with my movement, I was thinking and thinking and thinking of Kowalski, of that man, of that girl, but mostly of Kowalski. I really wanted to know if he knew what happened. Maybe he didn't. Maybe nobody knew. Maybe everybody knew. Maybe the girl got help, or maybe they attacked her again after she went downstairs. Maybe Kowalski had that party just so someone could attack drunk girls. Maybe someone told Kowalski, but he didn't care. Or maybe someone told him, but he just didn't care enough. Maybe I'm projecting. It doesn't matter. My walking was, as I said, mechanical from that day on. I would do it for hours at a time, thinking, obsessing over things. And not always about what I saw, not always about that girl or Kowalski, no. Sometimes I just remembered things, but I remembered different than how they were. And I know that was the case. I didn't believe, not for a single second, the stuff that popped into my head. They weren't fake memories, they were just different. I would remember conversations and arguments where I was faced with defeat, fights about the silliest things. But in these new memories, I didn't lose, I won. I spat knives of saliva and cut through the words of my biggest enemies. I stabbed them with my voice until their own voices were lost, buried under the overwhelming weight of those spears of meaning that poured forth from my mouth. It felt nice for a moment, I guess. But then the moment would pass, and I would find myself again in the forced blindness of the lack of light, afraid of the outside, of the things that lurk in the bright realms of normalcy. And at some point I would ask myself, and I would move my lips while asking, "Who are you?" And I would force myself to answer me and tell me who the fuck I was. I wasn't sure when I last had necessities or amenities, when I last had a shower. I felt so dirty, like a pig in the mud. No, like a pig in a butcher shop, dead, carved open, covered in my own blood and feces, ready to have my guts taken away and sold for pennies. One day, a couple of hours before Kowalski would usually get back home, I was in my cycle of walking when I heard Ghost. At that point, I had mastered the art, so when that happened, I just kept walking. I couldn't hear myself, so surely he couldn't either. But maybe I was wrong. It started as a scratch on the trapdoor. It lasted for a while. I think it was a long while, but it may not have been the case. When I heard it, I stopped. I was just waiting for it to stop with me, for Ghost to start up with his jogging, running, walking around the house like he usually did. And when that didn't happen, I retreated. I walked backwards until I touched the wall. I sat down. And then I saw it. He opened the trapdoor, pulled down the stairs, put a foot on the first step, and then the other. The gloom from the house entered the attic. I felt the pain in my eyes, but I couldn't avoid it. I had to look. I had to see. I had to know what was going on. Trembling, I waited. I could almost feel Ghost entering. But he didn't. I noticed he was breathing heavily. I listened to him, there on the stairs, doing nothing. And the scratching, it was still climbing up from below, from his hands, up the stairs, across the floor, to my ears. Even now I can feel it, like worms crawling on my skin, invading me, traveling to my brain to feed off me, to feed on my emotions, all that sadness. Oh, Jesus, I don't want to go back. And back then, I didn't want to get out. I didn't want to leave. I was so afraid. The scratching stopped, and not long after that, I heard the footsteps walking away. And the trapdoor was still open. I knew Ghost was still there, doing God knows what. And then, after some time, he came back and closed the trapdoor. 10 minutes after that, Kowalski was home. And then everything just proceeded as usual. For the rest of my time in the attic, I was either sitting down or lying inside the sleeping bag, motionless mostly, just thinking, just breathing. And it was mechanical. That day, Kowalski came home earlier than usual. That week, Ghost was worse than usual. Along with his walking and whistling and scratching and opening the door, he was also turning the TV on and off at whatever volume he wanted, slamming doors, hitting the ceiling with what I thought was a broomstick, and sometimes he would just start screaming, for no reason. I remember Ghost was jumping and jumping and jumping. First on the couch downstairs, I think. Then it might have been in Kowalski's bed, or the other bedroom. Then he went up the stairs, jumping. And then he would go and do everything in the opposite order. Stairs, spare bedroom, Kowalski's bed, couch. And like most days, he left the trapdoor to the attic open. He was at it for quite a while. But then, all of a sudden, he interrupted his ritual and ran upstairs. He passed under the trapdoor and made his way into one of the rooms. He was there, close to me. The next thing I heard was the door, the front door. soft footsteps, and then a voice. "What the fuck did you do this time?" Kowalski said. He was usually mild-mannered, but to be honest, I'd only listened to him as he spoke on the phone when he was close to my trapdoor. Yes, my trapdoor. This time, it was different. I could feel it. Rage, maybe disappointment or frustration. And something familiar, close. Something I knew and recognized in that deep voice. He walked. He tried to do it in silence, I know, but he failed. Stealth wasn't his best trait, it seems. I had lived within his house for a month. I knew things about him. I knew his favorite food, his favorite music. I knew his favorite porn. And for whatever it's worth, he didn't seem like a violent man. But at that precise moment, I swear I could feel his emotions, and he was mad. He was out for blood. Kowalski went up to the second floor. It was easier now for me to have an idea of where he was. The first thing he did was check the bathroom. He left immediately and went to the other room, the spare room, and then to the attic stairs. I knew he was standing there at the bottom. I was waiting, curled up in a ball, trembling, crying, a cry without sobs, ready for him to come up and turn on the lights and find me and do whatever he wanted, I guess. After all that time in the attic, in the darkness, with no food, I would have been too weak to even try and fight back. Whatever would happen to me, I would have no other choice but to accept it. "I swear, if you're up there," he said, with some kind of authority governing his voice. I didn't move a muscle. After he yelled, I didn't even breathe for several seconds. I held my breath until I heard his footsteps again, moving away, towards the room that I used to store my stuff. Then I heard another set of footsteps, running close, always close. And Kowalski yelled something and he ran. Both sets of footsteps moved to the first floor. Predators and prey, I remember thinking, in the primitive dance of life and death. And would that be my future if he found me, chasing me down like an animal? And then what? It was better not to think about it too much. Someone slammed the garage door. Someone broke something. There was more yelling. Kowalski's. And someone else. Was I hearing Ghost's voice for the first time? I heard the sounds of a fight. They threw each other against the shelves. They broke something made of glass. Things fell from wherever they were placed. And after that, there was a brief silence before Kowalski's voice cut through it. At first, I couldn't understand what he was saying. Then the sound came closer. The kitchen, the stairs, and just at the trapdoor, I could hear that one word he was saying. Fire. And then I could smell it. Smoke. The fire alarm started screaming. That high-pitched noise was unbearable, and the heat hit me in the face. I could feel it through the floor. That floor, always cold, always providing me with misery to sleep on. It was hot all of a sudden. My hands started to sweat from the residual heat. I thought to myself, this is my time. This is what I've been waiting for, a way out of here. Out of this attic, away from this pain, the misery, the darkness. Out of the fractured shell of the person I once was. Forever. I could not fall again if there was nothing below me to fall to. The bottom of the sea, where the pressure of the waters that cover most of the earth would crush me. But I only thought that for a moment. I broke away from that state of mind. And then, like a normal person, I panicked. In retrospect, maybe it was a good thing that I did. It was the first normal emotion I'd felt in a long, long time. Maybe I thought it was a sign of good things to come. I tried to get on my feet. I'd spent so much time inert, doing nothing, that every single inch of my body was in pain. Trying to move quickly was impossible, and even moving at walking speed was torture. But I had to move like a friggin' athlete, and I couldn't. The fire was closing in, I could feel it, and then the smoke started getting into my lungs, and it was closing in. I got to the trapdoor and the daylight stabbed me in the eyes, and the fire was still closing in. I couldn't see anything, and the fire was closing in. And on the way down, I fell, and miraculously, I didn't break my neck. And the fire was still closing in. I had to stand again, and the fire was closing in. Fortunately, I knew my way around the house from memory, but the fire was closing in. I found a window, and it was open, and the fire was closing in, and I couldn't jump, and the fire was closing in, and I fell from the second floor. And the fire devoured the whole house. Me, I was outside, and I was alive. And then I had no other choice but to face the world that I had escaped from again. And so, somehow, I survived the ordeal of the fire. The ambulance arrived just in time. The firefighters reached the house just in time. The fire didn't spread anywhere. Everything was contained. And Kowalski lost everything he had, as I learned later, much later. As for me, they told me I was in shock. The paramedics thought I was worse than I was and rushed me to the hospital. The general state of my health raised several eyebrows, but that was all. I got treatment for my eyes, and fortunately, that much time in the dark didn't hurt them that badly. I needed glasses, but I can still see. I was malnourished, weak, dehydrated, but it could have been worse. When the doctors interviewed me, I didn't know quite how to answer, so I made up a story with a bunch of lies and half-truths. Yes, I'm homeless, that's why I'm a mess. I was trapped in a basement somewhere. A man put me there. I don't know why. He never spoke to me. Eventually I escaped. I walked for what seemed like hours. I may have been in shock, as you said. I don't remember trying to speak with anyone, but I do remember feeling cold. Maybe that's why I wandered into a house that was on fire. I don't remember anything else. I don't think they believed me. But this teen pop singer girl, I think you know who she is, did. And she paid my bills and got me a job. Or her agent got me a job. And I think she tweeted about me once or twice. It was nice. But then, of course, the world turns and people forget. So everyone forgot about me after only a few weeks. Which is nice. Actually, it's beyond nice. It's the sweetest thing people could ever have done for me. With a new job and in that tiny studio apartment I dreamt about for so long, I was ready to go back into the world. Speaking again was a struggle, and dealing with people, going to the grocery store even. I haven't even tried to drive once since I've left the hospital. My salary isn't great, but I can pay for therapy and, keep a roof over my head. Slowly, I'm starting to open up about what happened in that attic. Everything I've said just now and more, the things I don't really want to discuss with you right now. It was more than a month. Yeah, more did happen. And now I take several showers a day, and I eat whenever I'm hungry, and I work out. I can't afford a gym, but there's a park close by to the house, to my home. I run there several times a week. The wind in my face, it feels like something that doesn't belong to me. I wonder if I ever... Never mind. It's been 6 months, so I can say that things are going well, or at least going. You see, this morning as I was going to work, there's a small bookstore on my way. I saw something in the window, a book called The Joke, written by John Kowalski. I couldn't resist. I entered the store and I asked for the book by name. The picture on the back, it was him. He wrote it, a novel. I bought it for old time's sake. I wanted to know more about my roomie. And now I've read it. It was a short book. It was about a man who one day hears strange noises in his house. He investigates and finds nothing, but the noises persist. So he installs a few hidden cameras around the house. In the kitchen, in the stairs, in both bathrooms. And the footage reveals that he, the narrator, he isn't going crazy. There are noises because someone is making those noises. The camera caught her, that bitch, stealing food, taking a shower, emptying bottles filled with urine, not always in the toilet. But this man, as most heroes of literature are, wasn't normal, no. He was well above average, so instead of doing the sensible thing and calling the police, he chooses to buy some weapons for safety and then starts a campaign against her. His cousin, it turns out, is between jobs, all because of a damn mental illness he has. So he, this cousin, could use some cash. And well, the hero of this story is rich. He can afford to pay someone just to go to the house and make some noise while he's at work. Ultimately, it was just a joke. The joke. He just wanted her to come down and apologize. It's not as if he was trying to make her crazy and then kill her in alleged self-defense. No, nothing like that. But alas, this cousin decided to stop taking his medication. And day by day he became stranger and started doing more than he was supposed to do. Like making a sculpture with bones and putting it on an altar in the basement. The narrator doesn't know where the bones came from and doesn't want to know. To be honest, neither do I. What is clear is that the cousin, he turned out to be too far gone. He needed to go back on his meds. They, the narrator and his cousin, they had an argument and a fallout. The cousin was fired. But the cousin kept going back to the house for days afterwards, and he was more aggressive, more unbalanced. And this brave narrator, aware of this thanks to his cameras, he came home early in order to confront him, and the cousin went crazy. They fought. Somehow there was an accident with a few cans of fuel that were lying around in the garage, and it started a fire that engulfed the house, killing both the cousin and the bitch that was hiding in the attic. The brave narrator, of course, lived to tell the tale. And now I wonder what Kowalski was really trying to do with me. Maybe, just maybe, things are as they seem right now. Or maybe not.
For another story, tune in next Tuesday. Meanwhile, watch another video. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Check the description for our social media. And sleep well.
If you can.